YouTube, and what else is there? LinkedIn never comes. I don't know what's going on with LinkedIn. Okay, so let's get rid of LinkedIn and let me open up the comments. The first thing I like everybody to do is tell me where you're at. Hi, good to see you all. I like the waves. I like reading your very interesting screen names, but I'm really curious to know where. I'm trying to get closer. Hang on, I'm going to fix this Instagram. I'm going to get you closer to me because my daughter set this up and she put the tripod a little further back. Let's see if that's better. So tell me where you're watching from. What part of the country, what part of the world? I know you're on different time zones. I have been away hi, Irvine. Good to see you down there. Hi, Zachary. You must be in Vegas. I drove through Vegas, but only to charge at the charging station. Hello, Newport Beach. Good to see you too. Who we got over here? Oh, Thomas is always here. You're from Maryland. Good to see you. Santa Barbara. Oh, love from London, the UK. Are we all quarantined there in the UK as well? Tell me what city, what country you're in. It's nice to know that people are getting up at crazy hours to watch live streams. And Philadelphia too. Oh, that's wonderful. Tennessee, Atlanta, Georgia. So nice. Welcome, welcome. It's such a treat. Sacramento, hello. So keep posting where you're watching from because I always love to hear this. I'm Dr. Wendy Walsh. I host a show on KFI AM 640 Los Angeles, and I'm looking back and forth because I have two different cameras here depending on where we're streaming. So forgive me if my eye line is moving from Instagram to everywhere else. And if you've been following my live stream regularly, you know that I have not been here for 2 weeks. And it is because I looked at the map of America and I saw that there were 0 COVID cases in the state of Montana and the government had opened it up. So I got in my car, my little electric car, my California girl. Hello, Chicago. How are you? Nice to see you. Hello, Iowa City. And I drove to Montana with 2 teenagers and a girlfriend, and we rented an Airbnb on a mountain in the woods overlooking a lake. And I just breathed and relaxed. And I'm telling you, my mental health recovered. I mean, it was a pre-planned vacation anyway. Hello, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, Redlands, California, Iowa City. Who else? We got Fullerton, Framingham, Connecticut. Hello, Hollywood, Florida, North Hollywood, San Bernardino. Oh, you're at work too. Got it. Welcome, welcome. It's always good to see you. So anyway, I missed you for 2 weeks. And while I was away, of course, the world turned upside down again. 2020 is so interesting. I'm actually reading a book by this evolutionary biologist right now. I should get the title for you before I start quoting books. And he wrote it in 2013, and he predicted that the world would be in great upheaval in 2020. And he has all these, Sydney, Australia. Hello, how you doing? What a shrimp on the Barbie, eh? And you go, Linda, you go to Montana every year. I love Montana. I was all the way up in Whitefish, 60 miles from the Canadian border. It was a little chilly. We were whitewater rafting in many layers because it was quite cold. And I was terrified of bears. I took bear spray no matter where I went. And in fact, we did see a bear, but not when I was on foot. Thank goodness it crossed the road when we were driving. Where else have we got? Some people? Vancouver, Canada. Hello. All right. So I took this 2-week break. My brain is better. The world fell apart. And while I was gone, I got to see 7 different states and how the Black Lives Matter movement and protests and marches took place in so many different small towns around America. Now, an ABC News study says that a full 75% of Americans now support Black Lives Matter. I am thrilled. If you're not aware, I have a multiracial family. My 2 daughters are biracial, African-American and me. And my almost 22-year-old is full of energy, been marching a lot and very impassioned. Shall we use the word impassioned? Okay, angry too. And so it has been, for me, joyful and exciting time to be alive. I know it's also been filled with tragedy and it's been filled with violence, so I don't want to make light about it, but it is also thrilling for me to see this change in a paradigm so quickly. And so for that reason, yes, we'll get into relationship problems. Yes, you can ask questions about relationships near the end. Thank you for asking. I decided to have a former colleague of mine, a friend of mine who knows a lot about fatherhood, because I happened to read an article that he wrote in Newsweek about the myth of Black fatherhood while we're busy dispelling myths out there. So let me first of all see if technically I can bring on my colleague, Josh Levs. Josh, are you there? You're here. Well, you're here on live on StreamYard, which means that you're on YouTube. It means you're on 2 Facebook pages and you're on Twitter. Unfortunately, you Instagram folks up there, you'll be able to hear Josh. But if you want to see him, you have to go over to my Facebook page or YouTube or Twitter. And it's at Dr. Wendy Walsh, same handle everywhere if you'd like to see him. But we have oh, hi, Trevor. How are you? Good to see you. So we have a split screen on all the other flows. So Josh, before we get going, I want you to tell everybody your story of how you became a fatherhood advocate.
Okay, sure. So thanks for having me. This is so great. And by the way, before I get into that, I have not yet been to Montana, but I dream about it anyway. You know, just the pictures alone. And meanwhile, I'm seeing where your attendees are right now. I mean, I spent time in Sydney, Australia. I've been all over the world, but I have not yet done Montana. That's got to be soon.
We also need to add Marietta, California, and Swan Lake. Where's Swan Lake, Tommy? You'll have to tell us.
But I saw you have people from Atlanta, which is where I live. Okay,
so you were in New York for some reason. You're in Atlanta.
No, everyone thinks I'm in New York. It's just everyone. But because I was on CNN for so long, and that's the background. You know, I was on 10 years on NPR and then 10 years at CNN. And while at CNN, I was a fact checker, and I was fact checking on air all these politicians and pundits and, you know, people who lie constantly. But at the same time, I became a dad, and I started noticing that there were all these false reports about dads out there. So I started doing what I do. I fact checked. I looked into the stats and studies and surveys and saw what the truth is about fathers and how it's so different from the stereotype. So I started reporting on that. And then there was this big switcheroo where I became the father in the news because I had a legal battle against CNN Time Warner for fair parental leave. So suddenly everybody was reporting about me. And then I wrote a book called All In about all that.
All in. And now you're a specialist in gender dynamics. But we should also say that you're also most famously known for delivering your own child on a 911 call. Like, that's pretty cool.
It was not something I'd wish on other people, but it worked out great. And we think he wasn't breathing at first, but then he was, and he's perfect. And all 3 of my kids are awesome. They're not as old as yours, old enough to be out on protests on their own. But we did bring them to protest the other day where we all held Black Lives Matter signs. You
know, on my show the other day, I was doing a summation of a book called something like Raising White Kids in a Racist Society or something. And the author, Jennifer Harvey, I remember the name, not the book name, but I remember the author's name, was saying that while it's probably not good to show small children videos of police brutality or violence to a developing brain, it's really good to take them to the healing part of it, the marches, and let them see, you know, the love and support out there. So I'm glad you're taking your kids to the market.
I mean, you understand, you know a lot more about psychology than I do. I'm an adult, and when I had to stop watching that video because I couldn't breathe.
I know.
You know, I mean, I think in the ways that it helps you, like, remember how important it is to fight the good fight. They're good to see, but trauma can also be addictive. I know enough about psychology to know that, and there is such a thing as overwatching a traumatic video. And so, even with adults, we have to.
I got through one time, barely. But I got through one time and I can't go back to it. It's too upsetting. So let us talk about your article in Newsweek about the myth of the uninvolved Black father. There is a myth out there. And I even noticed on social media today, a couple of people were posting, oh, you know, it's true and all this kind of stuff. But actually, it's not. Explain.
It's not. It is not true. Right. So it is a very popular myth. And to be fair, it's a myth that many people, even who fight against racism, believe. And many Black people believe this. But, you know, I'm in this unusual space because I'm the only fact checker about fatherhood. And as part of it, I looked into Black fatherhood. And folks, here are the facts. By far, the majority of Black fathers live with their children. The majority of Black children are not fatherless. And on average, Black fathers who live with their kids are the most involved in their kids' lives of all parents. And there's data from the CDC that backs this up. I wrote about it in my book, All In, and the lead researcher told me this marks the debunking of the Black fathers as absent myth. So it's simply not true, but it's brought up all the time as this catch-all excuse to ignore systemic racism.
And there's a reason why the myth got created. And I want to start by saying that, as an evolutionary psychologist, we are seeing a paradigm shift in our most intimate relationships. And this idea of lifelong monogamy, this nest to raise kids, is beautiful and lovely, but it's actually a pretty new invention in the evolution of our species. So what is natural for us is to stay together long enough to get kids up and out of the nest. But you got to remember, our hunter-gatherers, kids didn't need to have a college degree to survive. So they were up and out of the nest by the time they hit puberty, pretty much. And so as a result, our lifespans were spent with a lot of serial monogamy. And again, we have the widest range of sexual behavior of any primate species. We also have the widest range of paternal investment. In other words, in human beings, you're going to have the dude whose investment in his kid is a teaspoon of sperm. And at the other end, you're going to have the baby wearing, softball throwing, carpool driving, doting dad. And you got everything in between. And that goes across every race, every culture. That's species wide. So having said that, we have this idea that kids are only going to do well if they're in what we used to call a traditional, but I think it's newfangled, traditional family, where there's one male, one female, and that's the genders allowed, and that the kids are biologically related to both people in that household. That actually represents a fairly small minority of what's really going on today. So talk about, for instance, the address issue and school districts and how this myth came about.
So in general in America, not just for Black people, but in general, fatherlessness statistics that you've heard are wrong. They're vastly overblown, and that's because of addresses. So here's what's happened. First of all, people conflate marriage with fatherlessness, which is ridiculous. There are plenty of cases in which the parents are not married, but the dad is super involved. So when people say, oh, look at marriage statistics, no, not if what your concern is fatherlessness. There is no direct correlation there. Meanwhile, there's an address issue, and that's what comes up more often. So often researchers, when they're looking at this, they look at official homes with children. Unfortunately, in the millions of cases in which kids have parents living at two different addresses, in general, the standard arrangement is that kids spend time living with both parents. But kids can only have one legal address for school purposes. And for a combination of reasons, including pressures, societal pressures, most of the time the woman's address, the mom's address, is the legal address. So what happens is when researchers look at this data, they only register the mother's address as being a home with children. They do not register the father's address as being a home with children. And as a result of that, they assume that there's all these single moms who don't have dads in the kids' lives. And that's simply not the case. Again, it's a misreading of data that leads people to assume that these kids are fatherless when they're not.
And also, we should say that what really determines whether you have a father? Is it amount of time? Is it where you sleep? Is it really his presence in the room? Because we do know that there are kids that grow up in households with two parents living right there and feel kind of fatherless because he's so detached or a workaholic, etc., right?
Yeah, I mean, you were exactly, and this is part of what I wrote about in Newsweek, and I wrote about it in the book that, there actually aren't hard data on fatherlessness because there's no such thing as what fatherlessness is. You might have a father in the house with you and feel that he doesn't care about you or never pay attention to you. That's not the norm. Most dads are very involved in their kids' lives, the overwhelming majority, almost all. But you also might have a father who doesn't live with you, who is super involved, but maybe you need more time with him. Maybe you only see him once a month. So fatherlessness can happen, but it's nowhere near as common as people think it is. And that includes the Black community. Now, I mean, Wendy, I will say, and I've written about this, fatherlessness is more common among Black families than among other families. But that's precisely why people should be supporting, one of the many reasons people should be supporting the protests right now. If you care about fatherlessness, then you should care that there are dads like George Floyd who are being remembered as a loving father who get killed. And just in general, the justice system and the fundamental racism inside it that leads to more Black fathers being in jail, then their kids are not going to have them there. So if you care about this issue, if you care about fatherlessness, then you should be supporting Black Lives Matter and supporting the protests.
Because the systemic racism that I talked about, and by the way, anybody listening, if you didn't listen to my KFI show this past Sunday, you can go on the iHeartRadio app and listen to it. I can't listen to it because I cried, but it's a very personal story of racism, etc. But it's important to understand that there is systemic racism, and there is a school to prison pipeline that puts a disproportionate amount of men of color behind bars and disallows them from being good fathers because of this. So we have to understand this isn't like always personal choice. There's structural problems in there. I also want to interrupt to say, Josh, before you say one more thing, is that Josh Levs, you can find him on his website, joshlevs.com. And I think all your social media is at Josh Levs, Levs, like it sounds. If you have any questions for Josh, specifically about fatherhood, specifically because he's really into the fatherhood issues. I mean, he knows the stats better than I do. Then please post them and I have a look. And I want to say to my dear friend, Corin Metallica, who always shows up and asks me questions about my consumer attorney marketing group, you clog up the feed with all your comments. So I'm going to ask you, Corin, welcome, but stay silent now so that I can see some of the other posts, okay? And everybody else, because I don't want to have to block you. I just want to tell you, just go easy, all right? Someone has a question about court orders. What specifically is your question, Ryan, about court orders? I think he may mean when courts order, hello from Vietnam, when court orders somebody to be a father, are the courts doing a good job, in your opinion, of respecting fatherhood and allowing dads to be involved?
No, and that's a really good question. So courts are supposed to, all courts in America are supposed to treat parents equally, and they're supposed to operate on a default presumption when there are custody cases of 50-50. That's how it's supposed to be. Unfortunately, one way to think of it is that everything that holds back women at work holds back men at home. All of the prejudices that women have faced in the workplace, these assumptions that they're less capable. Oh, a woman wants to be a lawyer, a woman wants to be president, ha, 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 that kind of thing, it operates the same way against men at home. So a man as a caregiver, really? So there are judges who do not take this idea of equality seriously and do not operate based on that. And, people hear horror stories. There are horror stories. There are false accusations of sexual abuse against these things happen. The good news is that in the majority of cases, equal custody just happens without a court battle. Usually in divorce cases, that just doesn't happen. You don't have to go to court to make that work, or the parents work it out directly. And courts have been, based on the data I saw when I wrote my book, trending a little bit more each year in the right direction. But no, there are still some madmen thinkers in every system in America, and government, every system, and that includes in the court system, people who assume that women are the real parents and men are not, or people who believe the stereotypes that dads don't really care, dads aren't really involved, dads aren't really equally capable. And that's bad for women and men. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for children. So that's something we need to fix.
Josh, we've got a question on screen from Maria Rossi Stroop, and she says, can you tell me what is the percentage of children in California living without a dad? Now, I think the issue is, how do you define living without a dad, right? Can you explain this?
Yeah, wait. So the question is, what exactly about living without a dad?
What is the percentage of children in California living without a dad?
Got it. So I don't have the California stats. I'll get them for you afterwards. But the problem, again, is living without a dad, that those statistics don't exist. People will give you false statistics about that because you might just be joining us. But the data in general only show the school address, the official address for a child. So when a child's parents live in two different homes, in general, kids' addresses are not listed legally as being both. So we actually don't know what most of those living arrangements are. So if you see a large number of kids who are allegedly living with just their mom, that doesn't mean that they're not spending half the time also with their dad.
Mm-hmm. Also, there's a question on Instagram saying, what do we do? How do we fix this change about school addresses? In other words, one of the laws I love in California that passed a few years ago is that a child can have more than two parents as a legal guardian. And so this is it used to be that, let's say a single mother married a guy who wanted to adopt her kids, he would have to take the old bio dad off the legal representation. And so now they can say, no, the more adults to the party, the better. The more people who can care about kids and have an investment in them. Also, there are some gay couples who may have a sperm or egg donor and they want to put a third on there. So here in California, we can have multiple parents who are all legally obligated to help support kids. Could we do that with addresses?
Well, you know what's interesting, by the way? I mean, you know the history of this better than I do and of us as a species. But another part of what has happened in more modern times is the atomization of individual families. And historically, it wasn't unusual for kids to be raised in a village, raised in a group, to have multiple adults who were making decisions for multiple children. Even though there were the biological parents, there were also, there was often a group going on there. As for, yes, I mean, I do want to see this change. I want, in general, two things to happen. One, I want, in general, both addresses to be listed legally as homes with children, even if it needs to look like 40% here, 60% here. And I want
only one parent's allowed to deduct the kids?
Well, that gets into tax structures. It depends, because if one is paying child support, they still can deduct. But I want all researchers who work in this field to stop misusing data, even out of the best intentions. They come along and they say, this percentage of homes are single moms raising children, and they don't know that A, the percentage is wrong because they're not counting the dad's homes, and B, many of these moms are not raising kids alone because the kids are with the dads half the time. So a lot of it is the societal results of misuse of data. And this is something that researchers and institutions can solve ourselves.
Josh, there's a statement really that I put on I think it's really important that we address this, that Nikita Anderson Lastracco, if I said it correctly, said, wow, some white-splaining going on here. She said, I see it, I live it. Neither myself or brother know our bio dads. My mom is one of 14 siblings. So speaking for my plethora of cousins, only 2 of them have lived with their fathers. I think that has to do with poverty. That has to do, to say that has to do with a system that creates the poverty as well. I want to say this carefully because some people find this offensive. So hello, trolls, welcome. We're put on the planet to reproduce, right? And if you become somebody who can afford to put your name on a building, then you leave some kind of legacy, right? We all want to leave something behind. But the easiest thing to leave behind, and the most important, are our genes in evolution's chain. So you will find that men who do not have access to equity, capital, stuff, real estate, are more likely to say, okay, I will leave my genes everywhere if I can't build a bunch of structures that will live on without me. And that's deeply unconscious, by the way. I don't think consciously somebody goes out and says, I'm going to have 11 children just to show you that my genes will. Maybe they think it, I don't know. But that's important. And it's important to understand that, people like Nikita, have some trauma around this. Like, this is a real problem sometimes, but the data still shows that it's certainly not only Black families or Black men.
Sure. So let's tackle both parts of that. First of all, what you've experienced, I'm sure that there was real pain in that. And it's something that people of all races have experienced. And as I mentioned, I don't know if you were here with us, Nikita, for this part, but it is statistically more common in the Black community. And that is a natural and inevitable result of generations of systemic racism. It leads to that. And in my book, I actually have an entire chapter of a father who did leave all of his kids. He had kids by 3 different women. And he did not raise any of them, and he lived to regret it. And later on worked incredibly hard to try to make up for that and build relationships. And he has been building those relationships. And so I know that there are a lot of people who have your experience. But as for the white-splaining part of it, first of all, we have to be a fact-based nation to have real conversations. And a lot of what we lost in the last few years is starting with facts. If you care about truth and justice, truth comes first. So what are the facts? The facts are what I'm telling you. And it doesn't matter that I'm saying it or what my skin color is. Facts exist on their own scientifically. And it's also true that after my book came out, Charles M. Blow in the New York Times cited me. Your Black World had me on. News One has written about me and interviewed me a lot. And they have often asked me, one of them put it really well, why are we hearing this from one of our white brothers, instead of our fellow black brothers. And I said, because many people in the black community have believed this as well. President Obama believed this. It's been a very popular myth based on misread data.
And I do want to say something, Josh, that's really important is that if, I've been reading a lot of the book, White Fragility, is that people have been so afraid to talk about race that they're not even having the language. It's better we have difficult conversations and make mistakes and get corrected for it than to ignore that racism is an issue in our culture. That's my feeling. Like, we have to be brave enough to try to educate ourselves and not depend on our black friends to educate us about racism. We've got to do the reading and the work. But at the same time, we're going to make all kinds of mistakes, and that's how we learn. But in the past, we didn't even have these kinds of discussions. And that was the difference.
And these discussions are powerful in another way too. There are some guys out there of any race who shirk their families, who don't do the right thing.
Yep.
And they need to know they are not the norm. All right. No, you're not in good company. No, you're not just like most dads. No, you're not just being a guy. You are the shameful exception. Mm-hmm. And if someone wants to find a great male black role model, look at the world. Look to your left and your right, in front of you, behind you. And police and people throughout society should operate in the assumption when they see a black man that he's just as good a father as any other father they're ever going to be.
I put up Margaret Ivy's statement here. She said, if the stepmother doesn't support the relationship between stepkids and stepmother, it's futile. So what we have to understand too is having blended families is really, really challenging. And when adults haven't done their own work inside, they're going to their own personal therapy, having their own self-esteem, if they're jealous of their spouse's children or the relationship with it, then, it is not going to work. And it is very sad. What do you think the biggest challenges of blended families are?
Yeah. It's really, when you start off with two loving parents, this as a parent, I put it this way: from the moment your kid is born, it's like the big bang in your life. And you have this universe that you're responsible for. This as a mom, I know this as a dad. And the idea that partway through their process of growing up, I would have to cede any of my right to make decisions, or entrust them, in a bigger way than just babysitting style, to other people is really difficult. So that whole process, and I've interviewed a lot of people in these situations, it becomes very fraught with emotion, and that's very, very difficult. There are experts more like you on this who know how to work through this and come up with systems. And I do know families that have done it very well, in which they're clear: I decide this, you decide this, we decide these things together. And the more they have systems, the more they know what to do when situations arise. But, ultimately, the kids are going to grow up. And if they know that you did what you did by putting love first, a lot of the difficult times that they went through do kind of wash away, and they grow to understand that that's what you did.
And I think it's really important that all of us learn to put kids first. I put Lori Cole's comment up there. She said there are divorced moms who have been awesome with their kids. Of course, one stable parent can sometimes be better than two non-stable parents. Of course, absolutely. I actually have a friend who coincidentally happens, because we're having the conversation about race, happens to be Black. Her ex-husband married and divorced quickly. And in that marriage, that next marriage after her, had a little girl. My friend, when he'd have to have this 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old over his house, she went over and decorated the room. She'd go over and do her hair. And I'd say, that's the woman he had an affair with's baby. And she said, yeah, but it's my kid's sister.
Yeah.
Don't
forgive your husband or your ex-husband, forgive your kid's father. And don't forgive your ex-wife, forgive your kid's mother.
It's about the kids. We need it. And goodbye, Vietnam. I know. Good morning, Vietnam over there. He's going to work. It's 8:30. So good to see you. Glad you came by.
I do want to emphasize, to be fair to of course you can be super happy and super successful, and wonderful in every way with one parent. And by the way, two of our most recent presidents were fatherless.
In fact, I just put up Jim Waxer's comment. Obama,
look at that.
A single mother.
Yeah, two of our most recent presidents were fatherless. They were actual fatherless. They did not have their fathers in their lives. Yeah. And it's not like you inevitably have some problem. And for people who raise children alone, it is so incredible and something that, I have incredible admiration for. My wife and I share those duties, and I can imagine because I've talked with so many
now
people.
that you have three, you can't play man-to-man, you have to play zone. So that makes it even harder.
Yeah, we got to play zone. Always somebody getting away with something, right?
I have to say, and I'm going to answer this question because I get asked it a lot, and it seems like this is an opportune time. I have been a single mother for 15 years with 100% custody and $0 child support. So I've been protector, provider, caregiver, everything. And people often say to me, you're all about relationships, and why don't you have a romantic relationship? And the answer is I have two very secure relationships with my kids, and I focus on having a healthy attachment with them. And I have found that when men have entered, it's not like I've had no relationships, but when men have entered in my life, they, were jealous of the time I was spending with my kids. And I wanted to do a really, really, really good job. And I just posted on Facebook today, but how you have, I don't know if you have it with 3 kids, but the first one, you definitely have it. The book, every school picture, every year you put in the 8x10 from kindergarten, preschool, all the way up to college graduation. I have that of my daughter. And so on Facebook, I made a little video of me turning the pages as she ages today. And it ends with her holding her Harvard degree. And I was like, my work's done. I won the single mother lottery. I won.
Well, as a Yale guy, I'll tell you she went to the wrong school. But other than that, I'm really happy. I'm just playing. It's incredible. And and you have also, continued to fight the good fight. You are a Me Too hero. And there's all sorts of things that you've done that are just incredibly admirable. And you also have, these very intelligent conversations, which is why I always love when I come on your show and get to do this, because we can really talk things out in a way that that allows for people to learn and for each of us to learn too.
Yeah, exactly. I like Lori's comment here. Wendy, men are a full-time job. You got 2 girls.
It's
like taking in another child. No, I didn't say that. There are many men who are very helpful and self-sufficient. And but anyway, Josh, I'm going to let you go. And if anybody wants to stay on my live stream, I'm going to answer a few relationship questions because I've seen a few pop up here. You can find Josh Levs anywhere on his social media at Josh Levs. In fact, how do I take away a comment and put it back to you? Do I just click there? See, I'm not as proficient as I thought I was. Banners. No.
I'm so jealous of your professional setup there. It looks so, your studio looks so
on Amazon, and for $89, got some big old lights. I'm 58 years old. I cannot have good lighting. I have to have good lighting. That's just the way it goes.
I forget that every time I look at you. That's ridiculous.
So anyway, thank you so much for being with us, Josh. I'm going to take a few relationship questions now. You can find him online at joshlevs.com. He knows everything about fatherhood. I love it. Okay, and now we're alone. And thank you, Linda, for saying that. I don't know how to get rid of the comments. I only know how to keep adding new ones. So add some comments, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. I can put them on the screen that's going out. Question from Abbott Kinney. Do successful parents, this is off Instagram, feel like a total failure if their kids aren't like them? This is a really great question because we are seeing the first generation, these millennials, who will not do as well as their parents. Baby boomers were a specific group that, were sort of an economic group, a marketing group. And that's why we're seeing kids who fail to launch or are moving back home, et cetera. I think the most important thing we need to think about with our kids is, what is our definition of success? Is it what degrees they have, how much money they have? Myself as the mother of 2 very, very different children, because I believe, look, my first kid came out and she was so academic and so straight A's. People would say, oh my God, how did you do it? And I go, well, let me tell you. Then the second one came out and she's my artist athlete with learning disabilities. I'm like, wait, it doesn't have to do with parenting, actually. So the truth is they come out mostly who they are. And the best we can do as parents is model being good people, right? Just the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. So you have to also model what is a good definition of success. What is it about money? Is it about, stuff? Is it about degrees? Is it about profession? Or is it about self-esteem and happiness? Because I believe in the end of the day, life is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you like yourself, then That's the most important thing, right? Is you have to like yourself and you want your kids to like themselves. Okay, a hello from Cannes. How wonderful. Good to see you from Cannes. What time is it there? Must be morning, right? Somebody's asking a question. Your girlfriend accuses you of the one that's being bad. She's been in rehab. Do you have any ideas to get her help and not leave? Okay, well, this is the biggest $1 million question, right? When your help is enabling, when you have a dysfunctional person, especially somebody who suffers from mental health issues or suffers from addiction. And the answer is for you to figure it out within yourself by going to therapy yourself. I tell people all the time, well, they say, my wife won't go to therapy or my husband won't go to therapy. And I say, even one person can go to couples therapy because relationships are a system. And if you can change one cog in the system, you can change a lot of things. You change your reaction to somebody, you change the whole system. So the answer is for you to find out where that boundary is when you are being an enabler and need to create some boundaries for yourself, or when you're actually being a helper. Because if somebody's not ready for change, the only way to create their state of readiness, of course, is to abandon them or not support them and say, I'm done, until they hit their bottom, as they say, right? Okay, what else have I got here? No more comments over here. And what have I got up here on Instagram? I'm sorry to hear that, James, that your girlfriend has some mental health issues. And I think we all need to have a lot more compassion for people with mental health issues and not be as reactionary to them. Somebody's asking me, a divorced dad, any suggestions on how to properly co-parent for the health of my son and both parents with respect to, I can't see what's coming after that. Well, the answer is put the kids first in every decision you make, even if it means biting your tongue, sucking it up, not getting into fights with your ex, just understanding, I say this in relationships too. At the end, you don't want to win a fight. You want the relationship to win every time in every battle. And so when it comes to co-parenting kids, you want to be able to think about what's best for the kids, for you to just bite your tongue at this moment, to choose your battles carefully, to find, or maybe it might be to fight for your kids. Your kids need to know that you are trying to spend more time with them. And that could be an important part of letting them know that they are loved. Okay, if there's no more questions, I think we should probably wrap, right? We've been here 37 minutes. Isn't that enough time? I love you all. So every Wednesday I'm here at 6:00 Pacific time. And also my radio show, Real Live Radio, is on KFI AM 640 Los Angeles every Sunday from 4 to 6. You can listen anywhere in the world on the iHeartRadio app. In addition, it's up like the next day. So a lot of people miss it Sunday and then they listen to it another day. There's one more quick question. I took Lou from Granada Hills. Let's see what she's got here. It's Lou from Granada Hills. I took my boyfriend back, took the chance, and you were so right. It was hard to not get over what I'm used to, and he's starting his jealousy again. Well, that's an anxious attachment disorder, right? People have a lot of jealousy, have anxiety around relationships. They experience threats of abandonment very easily, and they have to want to change. You can't change somebody else. All you can ever do, you can't put a boundary on anybody else. You can only put a boundary on yourself, and that means changing your reaction to them. Okay, so Sundays 4 to 6 KFI. You could find it on the iHeartRadio app. Also, we have been producing more episodes of my podcast, Mating Matters, with producer Brooke Peterson. We haven't put them out yet because there's a lot more important things going on in the world right now. And we don't want to get buried in news that really matters. So if you haven't caught up, we do have about 50 episodes up there of Mating Matters, and you can get it wherever you listen to your podcast, whether it's iTunes or the iHeartRadio app or Google Play or Stitcher or wherever you can get Mating Matters. And it's evolutionary psychology. It's all the science of human mating strategies. Hi, Brian. Nice to see you. Thank you so much. We will see you all next week, 6 o'clock. I'll be here. You're welcome to send me any questions or comments in the meantime. And that's it. I love you all. Here we go. End broadcast. There goes everywhere else. And now goes Instagram.